Kennywood is just full of surprises lately as the park has announced a slew of new additions to be taking place over the next 2 years. The 2021 season was, all things considered, a pretty solid year for the park and a good recovery after the abomination that was the year 2020, but 2022 looks to be on another level entirely. Before I get into the most recent announcements, let's go over what we already knew would be happening next year. I already made a video talking about Phantom's purple repaint, and that's pretty much complete now. Thunderbolt is also receiving extensive track work and a repaint that looks really clean if I say so myself. I'm still holding out hope that the white outline on the Thunderbolt logo comes back, but while those two projects have been going on, the park confirmed more repaints that were heavily speculated, Racer and Jackrabbit. Jackrabbit will surely look nice, but it didn't need the repaint as much as Racer did. For a while, it looked as though the park wasn't sure if they wanted Racer to stay the dark red it has been for a while or return to an all-natural wood color. But with this repaint, it seems as though the red will return completely, thank goodness. Okay, with all those repaints out of the way, let's talk about Kangaroo. I was gonna make a video about this when it was first announced, but now I'm glad I waited. The removal of Kangaroo at the end of the 2020 season, to really understate things, angered everyone. It brought out the same public reaction as when Conneaut removed their Tumblebug. Nobody was happy. Thankfully, this outcry didn't fall on deaf ears, as the park announced Kangaroo's return in November. This wouldn't be exactly the same Kangaroo though, as the park has brought in premier rides to refurbish the attraction and give it some updates. At first, I thought these updates would be something like seatbelts or some sort of new restraint, but there's much more to it than that. In addition to a new paint scheme that was voted on by the public, they're bringing back the neon Kangaroo backdrop that was present decades ago. This is going to look absolutely fantastic, and we now have a render of the final product that I'll show here soon. These are the two themes the public could vote on, Classic and Vintage, with the Vintage theme emerging as the winner. Everyone was already pretty excited about this, but nearly a month later, we would get even bigger news. On December 16th, Kennywood announced a huge multi-year investment plan for the park, leading up to their 125th anniversary in 2023. These multi-million-dollar investments would breathe new life into several areas of the park, and we even have renders of what these changes will look like. So let's go through these images in order, and we'll see what the future holds. Before you even get into the park, we have this new walkway leading to the entrance, with new railings and banners. I especially like this one here that references the Golden Nugget dip cone stand next to Kittyland. When you get up to the main gate, new colors are everywhere. The carousel horse is repainted, and the fountain below it is being replaced with a flower garden. I can't decide if I like this better or not, but I'll decide when I see it in person. We can also see a new coat of paint for the entrance buildings and a huge Kennywood sign in the center, plus more of those banners hanging around. The choice of colors used here is unusual to me, but we'll have to see if it changes from the render to when it actually gets painted. In this next image, we see the Old Mill Midway, and there are almost too many changes here for me to list off. The biggest change is the new facade for the Old Mill, a much better look for the front than what we got in 2020. I love that the wood texture here matches that of the actual Old Mill building, and the ride logo at the front is now perpendicular with the building. Easier to notice when walking up to it, I guess, but you don't really need to have the sign turned like that when you have another Old Mill logo right over here. We can also see a new entrance sign for Old Mill, another huge improvement over the sign the ride has had for the past 2 seasons. These new poles have been added out front of the ride, and they're being used to hold more of those banners we saw at the park entrance, so that pretty much confirms that these new banners will be replacing the ones we've seen around the park for years, which featured various attraction logos. Does this mean I can finally get a Phantom banner if they don't need them anymore? I mean, back on track. We can see a strand of lights hanging from this pole, so it looks as though they're attempting to extend Old Mill's theming outside of the ride itself. I do want to point out these painted lines on the ground. Much of the park is being repaved as part of these investments, so it's interesting to see them painting it to resemble what looks like a roadway. We'll have to see if it's just this area or all of the walkways that get painted. Before I move on, I want to mention that there's a second, lower quality version of this image floating around, but this one seems more complete. The two banners hanging here are different, referencing Laughin' Sal and Cowboy Joe, and we can even see that the Midway game next to Old Mill has been named after Cowboy Joe. There's even some new side art on the building here. This version of the image came from the park's social media pages versus this one which was provided to me by the park itself, so perhaps the social media version is a newer render. Anyway, let's move on. Alright, now here's what I was talking about earlier. We finally get a look at what the Kangaroo backdrop will look like next year. As you can see, it's remarkably faithful to the original backdrop, and if the kangaroos on top light up in sequence to simulate motion, that would be even better. I'm not extremely fond of the giant kangaroo letters, but I'm sure they'll grow on me after a while. We can also see here the colors of the Vintage theme, which won that poll the park held. Here's something interesting. Jackrabbit is getting a new entrance for next year. I don't know about all of you, but the design of this entrance to me bears a vague resemblance to some older photos of the coaster, minus the giant rabbit of course. I hope they change this design by next season in favor of something more elaborate than this flat archway, but it will be nice to have a proper entrance gate for the coaster. And that's only half of Jack Rabbit's new queue. There will also be a new mural on the side of the arcade, and what this mural will be is once again being decided on by the general public. The park has provided a list of themes that everyone could vote on up until Christmas Eve. At the time I'm making this video, it's not yet revealed which themes won, but this is a solid list to choose from, and if they stick to the template shown in the mock-up image here, it's gonna look really clean no matter what. We're almost done here, but first we have an image showing a new look for guest services, and they're really running with the whole black and gold theme. I know everyone's going to associate that with the Steelers, and the fact that the park has a whole Steelers area now doesn't help that, but you've got to remember that those are also the colors of the Kennywood logo as well as the flag of the city of Pittsburgh, so that's clearly what they're going for here. Can you tell that I don't really care about football? And before any of you post that Phantom is a Ravens coaster now, shush, just be quiet. For the final image, we have a look at a new design for the beer garden area. Not really an area that I ever spend a lot of time in since I don't drink, but I do like the new backdrop as well as the wooden awning with the lights. I never thought this area looked bad, but comparing it to how it currently looks, this is just so much better. We can also see that this area will be paved as well. Well then, that's a lot to take in all at once. Kennywood next year is going to feel like an entirely different park, but that's in the best way possible. It's clear that when Palace Entertainment started referring to Kennywood as their flagship park, they meant it. And with their recent purchase of Iowa's Adventureland, it's obvious that they want to improve their image in the amusement industry. All these upgrades to the park are clearly steps in the right direction, and the park has even teased new summer events like the return of the popular Bites and Pints Festival, which will run longer next season, and a mysterious new nighttime event. If some of you remember from this past summer, the park held an event for pass holders called Luna Rides, which attracted a huge crowd, so that was clearly them testing the waters for whatever this new event will be. With all these new investments, and assuming everything will be up and running, I'm looking at you, Curtin, these next 2 years could be the best years the park has ever seen, but only time will tell. I am very curious to know what all of you think about these new renders and announcements for the park, and if there's anything you would or wouldn't change. It's definitely an exciting time to be a Kennywood fan. With all that said, thank you all for joining me for this Kennywood News Roundup. I hope you're all as excited as I am, and make sure to stay tuned for my Kennywood 2021 season recap here on Rampaging Rex Productions.